All right. We're here once again tonight. We got Redhawk, but before we get to that, we have the expatmoneysummit.com coming up. expatmoneysummit.com. It's the world's largest offshore event taking place entirely online from October 7th through 11th. Put on by Mikkel Thorup, host of the Expat Money Show, and a highly sought after expat consultant with over 2 decades of experience. Discover why international diversification is a must for those looking to preserve their liberty and wealth. Learn everything you need to know about crafting your perfect plan B, how to quickly acquire a second passport, diversify your finances offshore, invest in international real estate, and get in depth insights on geopolitics from world renowned experts. Headline speakers include Dr. Ron Paul, Doug Casey, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, Mark Faber, Tom Luongo, and many more. So reserve your complimentary ticket. Head over to expatmoneysummit.com. That's expatmoneysummit.com. It's completely free, 4 days, October 7th through 11th. The clock is ticking. We're getting real close to the time. So remember, October 7th through 11th, expatmoneysummit.com to reserve your free ticket. What's going on, Red Hawk? How are you doing, buddy?
Oh, well, thanks for having me on. This will be fun to talk.
Yeah, it should be good. I'm not sure how many of my audience members know you. I've heard you on Old Glory Club because I'm friends with Pete, and every once in a while I'll jump in there and see what y'all are chatting about. And then I've also heard you on a friend of the show, Kyle Matovic, and also a personal friend. And he suggested that I sit down and chat with you. He said he thought it would be a fun conversation. So I'm excited to dig into some of this stuff and see how your brain works because I really enjoyed y'all's last podcast y'all did. What was it? 2 months ago, where you were defending MAGA against for Kyle, and I thought that was a really interesting podcast. You had some really interesting views and kind of nuanced views that you don't hear all the time.
Mm. Yeah, Kyle's a good dude for sure. I had the opportunity to sit down and have a drink with him a couple months back. Really awesome guy, and yeah, that was a fun conversation as well. It's nice. I like to kind of call myself as a recovering libertarian at this point. I know they'll probably upset a couple people, but it's fun to have those discussions back and forth with people.
That's okay. I mean, I've been at the Libertarian Institute since 2018. That's where I met Pete, actually. And yeah, I don't, it was 2019. I heard Tucker Carlson refer to Hillary Clinton's foreign policy as libertarian foreign policy. And I was like, well, if that's what normies think for libertarian foreign policy is, I don't know if I'm going to call myself a libertarian anymore. So I've kind of been on that bandwagon for a little while.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation a couple months back with Jeff Deist, and he said something kind of similar in the sense of, whatever the term libertarian meant when people like Rothbard were using it in the 90s, it's clearly not what the term means now. I mean, can anybody with a straight face call like Chase Oliver a libertarian in the way that Rothbard and Mises and, or even Hoppe or all these other people use the term? I don't really think he can.
Yes. Yeah, I completely agree with you. And there's something to the aspect of what these people are entitling libertarian. I'm sorry, I get tongue tied there. Um, I'm 45 years old. I have 5 kids. I own property. I'm a truck driver. So when I got into the libertarian sphere, it was about personal freedom and being a truck driver, being out on the road by myself, like personal freedom, riding motorcycles, things like that were important to me, like on a cultural basis. But then whenever I would hear like Walter Block, like defending the indefensible, and I'd be like, what are these people talking about? Like this is kind of abnormal, for me, especially being from the South. I was born in a small town in Louisiana and raised in Texas, and so it's kind of, and I know Walter Block's from New Orleans, but still, it's kind of like this kind of abstract kind of view that is has no concrete meaning in reality.
Hmm. Yeah, very much so. I tend to find a lot of people, whatever they want to call themselves, like the dissident right sphere, or whatever you say these days. I find a lot of people first came to that sphere from libertarian circles. And I think the origins for that are simply kind of what you were describing. People just simply wanted to be left alone. They see that the Republican Party is really not in the interest of actually their voter base. They're more in the interest of big business or foreign policy that the voter base doesn't really want, and they kind of cuck on all the social issues whenever it's convenient for them because they all want to be called mean names by the Democrats or the media apparatus or what have you. So a lot of people start looking for alternatives. You're not going to go to the Democrats, obviously, because they're not for your interests either. So what else out there? Well, let's give these libertarians a shot. This idea that everybody is able to express themselves in a free manner as long as you're not hurting anybody else. That sounds great to a lot of people, because I just want to be left alone. Well, maybe everybody else wants to be that way too. I think the issue that libertarianism, as people conceptualize it now, falls into three issues. Number one is, well, can everybody be free? Does everybody want to be free? And should everybody be free? And I think a libertarian would answer yes to all of those. But I think if you just look out into the real world, particularly in the light of what was happening in 2020 with things like COVID-19 pandemic, the simple answer to all those is just no. If you look on the face of all of it, I think we could take apart each of those in turn. I mean, can everybody be free? Well, we know that everybody doesn't just simply from an intellectual capacity can't be free. I mean, like a person from 65 IQ in Haiti does not have the same capacity to be free as somebody who grew up in the United States of America their whole lives and has a concept of whatever Bill of Rights you want to talk about, right? You can't just plop somebody onto the magic dirt of America and they're magically going to be acclimated to 2,000 years of Western thought and freedom, right? So we can
Mm.
just throw that one right out the door. And then does everybody want to be free? Well, we kind of just noticed in the 2020 pandemic that people just willingly throw all their rights away because of a cold and because the media told them to. So we can kind of throw it right out the window that not everybody really wants to be free. And then the final one, I think this is the biggest hurdle for a lot of libertarians to get over is, well, should everybody be free? And this is when you start getting into issues of, well, do we have to limit and curtail other people's freedoms? And a lot of libertarians say, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be censoring somebody's speech. When I come from this perspective, well, I don't really think it's done any good for the world that communists are allowed to talk and indoctrinate kids in the school system. I don't think that's made the world a better place that they're allowed to do that. I don't think the world is a better place for like Satanism or like drag queen story hour or anything like this to be taught to little kids. I don't think that makes the world a better place. So yeah, I do think that certain people's freedoms should absolutely be curtailed.
Mm. I agree with you. It had to be about COVID, where those three questions I probably would have answered yes to prior to COVID. But during COVID, I started really reevaluating the way I looked at things. And, up until about 2015, I looked at politics as entertainment. To me, it was
Mm-hmm.
nothing more than entertainment. I would watch the Glenn Beck program and I would think it was interesting, but I would watch it kind of like a documentary, a docu-series, him on the chalkboard, with all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting stuff, and it's like almost like suspense, right there in real life right before your eyes, but it never translated into my life. It was just something to kind of digest and look at and to keep my mind working. And I never took it all that seriously. I was raising kids. I was working full time. I wasn't really that interested in politics beyond that. And then I guess it was 2015. I started getting involved in the political election, the primary specifically. And like you, I was also a Ted Cruz supporter. And and then I took a step back. I got on a phone call with Austin Peterson, and we had a phone call, and he was reading the same book I was reading, Jefferson, the Art of Power. And so we discussed that, and we talked for about an hour, and he turned me on to some books. That's how I discovered Rothbard, was through Austin Peterson and talking to him. And then go down the whole rabbit hole with Tom Woods and um, Contra Krugman and all these different podcasts because I'm driving a truck all day long. So it was kind of like a natural transformation into this kind of libertarian mindset. At quickly uh, found myself making a 180 once COVID hit, and I was like, wait a minute. I think I was a little bit more grounded in living in reality whenever prior to discovering libertarianism.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, COVID was certainly a huge wake up for a lot of people for obvious reasons. I mean, we were told that all of these institutions that make the West and the United States of America so great, these checks on power that are going to step in when the emergency situation calls, they were just completely thrown by the wayside. And especially looking back on it now, 4 years later, it was over something that was so horrendously overblown. And then not only just the combination of it being so overblown that we threw all these freedoms to the side for, is that there's just no accountability for the people that led us to where we are today. And I think that really does get to a lot of people. It's like, okay, I was told basically a bunch of lies as to how the system actually works and how these checks and balances were going to hold people accountable. And then to see it all just thrown in my face, it makes people question a lot of their priors.
Mm. Yeah, because like my whole perspective was, well, we can figure it out on our own. We don't need these institutions. And prior to COVID, it was easy to look at it that way. But then post COVID, it was like, oh, well, if I don't try to have some control over these institutions that are going to exist no matter what I believe in my little utopian dream as to what the way things should be, there
Mm.
is the way things are. And the way things are is these institutions exist. And if we don't grab power of those institutions, these institutions are going to be weaponized against us, whether we believe in them or not.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be some kind of limitations on the worst aspects of humanity in some shape or form. And if you don't have strong social institutions, then a natural byproduct of that is going to be strong government institutions. Now, I think libertarians get this right to some extent that they don't want strong restrictions, from a government perspective. I guess I can get behind that to some degree. But then it seems like there's this aspect of like the more social side of libertarians, like I don't know, like the Chase Olivers of the world, or you're more like left-leaning libertarians who say that, oh well, we shouldn't even have any restrictions on like from even a societal level on the worst aspects of humanity. And that is just a complete recipe for disaster, as far as I'm concerned. You need strong order within the family. You need to have a dad who's going to lay down the law. You need to have strong church institutions. You need to have a strong community. You need to have a strong racial or ethnic identity. All of these things that actually kept people in check for thousands of years without this omnipresent, technologically advanced state that we now live in 2024. You need to have something to keep people in check, and you can't just throw all these things aside because the government can't do this. Well, if the government's not censoring speech, then somebody is going to. Whether it's like in your church, you can't be blaspheming in your church, and maybe you don't like that. Whatever, that's an argument for another day. But these institutions have to exist, and so that means you have to engage with them and you have to fight for them because if you cede them, your enemy is going to take it from you. And I think this has just been proven to us at this point. There's no such thing as a neutral institution.
Well, I think also there's this aspect of building up the older institutions that were kind of brushed aside for the more modern institutions. So you bring up a church, right? Well, the church cedes power to the state in the moral claim in so many ways, whether it be war or immigration or just the way we deal with each other within our community. And so I would think that like building up these older institutions that have kind of been forgotten would substitute the more modern institutions that are abusing the citizenry.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. I think this is something that our mutual friend Pete is constantly hammering people about. And I think he's correct. Is that as it relates to like the national scene of like politics and such. Ideally, you'd want to live in a world where nobody really has to pay attention to it. You have a group of elites that actually has the interest of its people at heart, doesn't see the nation as just an economic zone to be exploited, doesn't see its people as being interchangeable with anyone else in the world like cogs in a machine. Ideally, you wouldn't have to look into it, and people could actually spend their time in their communities, whether it's their church, whether it's their school district, whether it's their local politics, their sheriff's office, what have you. That is where
Hmm.
people should be spending most of their time and making the most difference. But as we were mentioning before about how these local institutions have been broken down throughout the last 100 years, definitely in the United States, people spend way more of their time focusing on the national level because essentially that's where all the power is these days.
Well, and for people like me and Pete, that was a rude awakening that really pissed us off because we grew up believing we didn't have to pay attention to those things, right? We were the latchkey kids. We were off doing our own little thing. And so when we hit adulthood and the government had continued to grow, these institutions had continued to gain power, and we saw them forcing this agenda down our throats and down our children's throats, we stopped and we looked around and we said, hold on one second. We have to speak up about this because this is bullshit. This isn't the way that we live our lives. So it was almost like we woke up in a foreign country just overnight. Now it happened gradually, but it felt like an overnight turn. And it felt like a serious betrayal because of the way we were raised and what we were taught to believe was completely inadequate anymore in the system in which we found ourselves living.
Yeah, and I definitely see this same realization definitely come over the heads of a lot of people I associate with, who are guys even on the younger side, like libertarians and Zoomers, and we often get in these kinds of squabbles with particularly boomers when we reach this realization to them, and like everyone has this. Aha moment when you're talking to a boomer, right? It's kind of like you're hitting a brick wall when you bring up this discussion. But just the simple fact, like when you talk to some of these like more like Con Inc. types and say, well, I'm not going to grow up in the same America that you were going to grow up in. And that like really hits people hard when you put it in those terms. And
Hmm.
this is what draws way more people, especially on like the younger side as you get younger and younger, to far more radical right wing politics. I mean, I kind of see this with Zoomer guys. Like they're either like so far unbelievably to the right, it's crazy, or they're literally like transing themselves. Like there's just no like middle ground anymore for so many of these people. They live in a radical time, so they're developing radical politics as a result.
Right. Right. And I do find it funny, and Pete would probably agree with me on this, is I find it funny that I hear people talk about like radical right-wing politics and what people call radical right-wing politics today is average conservatism of the 90s. And
Yeah,
so the only radical side I can see is the left. Like to
yeah.
me, like what's happening on the right, it's like, oh yeah, yeah, you're basically like a moderate or barely conservative as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the next coming of Hitler is Matt Walsh, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, basically my dad.
yeah,
So, all right.
yeah.
Well, I think that's a good transition because that kind of lays down some of the way we're thinking about the world around us, and it probably has a lot to do with why you started the Old Glory Club. So, do you want to talk about the Old Glory Club, what its goal is, and the way that it operates?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a little bit of background. So we officially went public with the OGC on Veterans Day in 2022. We'd been working behind the scenes for about 8 months before that. Me and a bunch of other American content creators. Pete Quinones, our mutual friend, was one of the founding members. Other friends of mine like the Prudentialist, Paul Fahrenheit, uh, Charlemagne, Stephen Carson, and the whole other menagerie of characters that you see on the OGC streams, about 15 of us or so. We all
Hmm.
met at a conference in Tennessee in February of that year, and the conference was hosted by a European group, and we were all in like the same group chat and all the same channels and such. And so we went and met in person, and we basically came to the conclusion that we need an American version of this. And so that's basically where it started from there. And throughout the last almost 2 years now that we've been public, we've rolled out a couple of initiatives. Most notably, one of them is our chapter initiative. So the OGC itself is a fraternal organization, and we have lesser chapters underneath our banner across the country. As of this recording, we have 6 official ones, and we're looking to have around 20 by the end of the year. And they're all incorporated, under a fraternal order status, and they're all across the country. And basically, the goal of those is to get like-minded guys in local communities to either help you, say, find a job or move across the country. We have one of our guys who's currently moving from Virginia to North Carolina, and he's having guys in North Carolina help him get set up in a new area and such. So we wanted to take the bull by the horns, so to speak, and really start doing local activism, local on the ground work for our guys. So whether it's maybe in the future people want to get more politically involved, but our fraternal organizations as themselves are not political as such. We're looking more for like-minded people to get themselves set up. And we mostly over-index in younger guys. I'd say most of our membership is between the ages of like 25 and 32 is most of our guys, which is interesting because you go to a lot of like old head, like conservative groups, or look at something like the Elks Lodge or the Masons or what have you, these old fraternal organizations. And it's a bunch of like gray hairs, they're like guys who are like way older and such. So we wanted something for our young guys.
And where did the name Old Glory Club come from? What inspired that name?
Well, then the name itself comes from Old Glory, just the flag of the United States. The
Okay.
original one is where the name comes from. But we tossed around ideas and for different organizations and names for a couple of months before we officially came out with the branding. And then, of course, we have our YouTube channel where we do Thursday streams. Our Thursday weekly news show is Pony Express Radio, and then we also have a Substack attached to our account as well, where we put out 3 articles a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The Friday is the paywalled stuff. Occasionally, we do podcasts behind the paywall as well, because Substack is pretty nice with not censoring people. So when we want to put something a little bit more spicy, we put it up on Substack.
All right. Well, that's good. And where can people find out more about Old Glory Club? Do y'all have your own website, or would it
We
just be
do.
following your Substack?
Yeah, the quickest way to get all your answers is to just go to our website, theoldgloryclub.com. We have a page there with all of our current chapters is on a certain page. So if you find one of those chapters that's in your area, you can directly contact those. You get put into a group chat. You get vetted by the people who currently run that chapter. If they like you, they start bringing you to their meetings. And then, if they like you more, they'll make you a member. And in the future, we're going to be rolling out a bunch more perks for our members, so to speak. We have this idea for doing cancellation insurance way in the
Mhm.
future. So if you end up getting doxxed, lose your job or something, everyone's going to start paying dues, and we could cover you if there's an emergency. Like I was mentioning before, a lot of it is job training. We have guys in Tennessee that are getting other people certified in various engineering jobs and such like that. And also, like I was talking about before, about like a based hostels organization, for lack of a better word. Like you're traveling around the country, either for business or for work, or you're looking for a new place to set your roots down or something like that. You have a network of guys that you can immediately call up, and that every one of these guys basically shares your politics, shares your worldview, so you can trust these guys.
And is there like a year prospect, like time frame where you get hazed and
We do run it. That'd be funny. We do run it from like a decentralized model, in the sense of that the central committee, like the actual founding members, we're not looking at everything that the chapters are doing with a magnifying glass, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
America is such a huge country, it would just not be feasible for us to say like, oh, okay, you guys in Tennessee and you guys in New England need to be doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. It's just
Mm.
ridiculous. I mean, we have guys who are looking to start a chapter up in California, and they're looking to do some extra, careful legal work, so to speak, to avoid, the Eye of Sauron coming down on them in California, because obviously that's hostile territory. So
Mhm.
we're not going to sit here and say, oh, like you have to do everything exactly the way that we want you to. We kind of like the decentralized model way more. And it also protects you as well, because if one person in a chapter in Michigan does something really stupid and like goes like all Fed posty or something, that doesn't make
Mhm.
you like responsible if you're in like the Florida chapter or something like
Yeah,
that. So
you're not guilty by association. So
yeah,
yeah, you don't end up in a Proud Boys situation, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that that joke went haywire really fast.
Yeah,
Um,
and we definitely thought about that right at the start as well. And this is why we don't do like you're never going to see an OGC group of people like out in like a protest march or something like that. There's never been something we want in our laws that we have. Well, our rules, I should say, for our organization, we like forbid chapters from going out and doing that kind of stuff because number one, we think it's stupid, and number two, it makes everybody else look bad, and number three, it's just not productive. So like that, we're not focused on these being like individual little political activist groups where we can mobilize everybody to start, rallying for Trump or something like that, at the drop of a hat. That's not the goal. The goal here is just to get people set up in their own communities at home and start looking into more local politics and localism.
one of my good friends, Gordon McGill. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's done some articles for Newsweek writing about truckers and the trucking industry and stuff like that. And he covered the trucker strike in Canada real closely because he's originally from Canada. He had uh he had told me about a guy in Canada who was a streamer that was doing this whole joke about Diagolon during the COVID pandemic. Did you hear about this?
No, I did not. No.
Oh, so apparently, if you could go at it from make a diagonal line across the United States and cover all the states that did not adhere to COVID policy, basically. And I'd have to go back and look in grave detail about this, but it was just this joke. He was saying Diagolon is its own country based, in the middle of the United States, basically, is what he was saying. And it was this huge joke he was making about the COVID mandates and how people are not adhering to them and protesting them. And so the federal government began to started coming down on him as if he was making some activist group, and they I think they've arrested him a couple of times, just because one guy at a protest wore uh, a sticker that he had made for Diagolon, and it was just this made up flag that he had made that was just its diagonal white line across this blue background. And some guy was wearing it to a protest, the truckers protest. And so they nailed him down with being like some terrorist or something like that. So you got to be very careful when it comes to that activism.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially under the current Biden administration and God forbid the Kamala Bamba administration, should that come in the fall here. I mean,
Yeah.
the laws mean what they want them to mean. All right,
Hmm.
you're simply not going to get the same protection codes that like that a Democrat is going to get. I mean, look, there were people that shut down entire blocks in Seattle for the Chaz during the summer of Floyd, and none of those people felt any consequences, but they are still hunting down people for J6 stuff. I mean,
Right.
it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, you brought up Harris, so let's talk a little bit about the election and what you're seeing with the polls and with the election, what you think the temperature of the country is going forward. Whenever whenever Trump was up for election the first time in 2016, um, I was I had my finger more on the pulse of the United States. I had gotten back over the road and started driving over the road again, and was was seeing all the Trump signs, and I was seeing no positive feedback for Hillary Clinton. And no matter how hard the media tried to prop up Hillary Clinton, you would never see that in regular everyday life. And I kind of have the same feeling this election cycle with Kamala Harris that I did during that Clinton election cycle, but they may have learned some tricks during the Biden election. So, what do you think's going on as far as the election goes?
So I would definitely agree that the feeling of the country as it relates to the election, it feels way more like 2016 than it does in 2020. I
Mm,
think even though I do believe that the 2020 election was not the most safe and secure election in our history, to say the least. I do think that there was a faction of old blue dog Democrats that did see Biden as like the last vestige of the old left, so to speak. He's been around forever. He speaks
hmm
to like to unionists and such like that, and I think that that faction in the Democrat Party at this point is just completely gone. Biden has just uh, not only has he shown himself to be incompetent on the debate stage because he can't even talk, but his policies, people are really hurting in the country right now. Now, as it relates to the whole Harris campaign, again, I feel like it's very similar to Hillary Clinton. In fact, I think she's even less likable than Hillary Clinton. The media is trying so hard to push her as this, amazing candidate that everyone loved, and they didn't even pull a primary for her and such. I don't know if you heard this, but James Carville, one of these head Dem donors and such from the old Clinton machine, it
hmm
got leaked just earlier this week. He was on a meeting with a bunch of Democrat staffers, and he basically just called them all fat and gay and said that like none of you know what the hell you're doing. Like yelling at a bunch of Zoomers and stuff. Just like what the hell is going on? Like you don't appeal to anybody. You're not winning any votes. So do I think in an actual free and fair election, does Kamala Bamba have a chance? I don't believe so at all. However, the great question, like the sword of Damocles that's hovering over everybody's head for this election cycle is, well, are they going to pull the same kind of shenanigans again in 2024 that they did in 2020? Now, there are some people that are arguing, well, you never rob the same bank twice. Maybe in a rational sense, yeah, maybe you shouldn't. It is clear, though, that the Democrat machine is not run by, the most rational people anymore.
hmm
So maybe they are foolish enough to try this again. But I think less so than actually gauging the intelligence and the rationality of the Dems. I think a lot of people get this kind of wrong about, well, how do they rig elections, right? Well, it's not that they just go into voter machines and change zeros and ones on the machines, right? I mean, granted, there is a little bit of that in some cases that we are know of, but how they do most of this stuff is just by ballot harvesting. And by ballot harvesting, you actually need people on the ground. You need a seriously organized ground game with a bunch of people, activists, that requires a lot of manpower and a lot of people across the entire country doing this kind of stuff. And I just do not see the spirit and the animating force in the Dem base this time around for them to muster the people to go out and actually do the grunt work that needs to be done. Like you were mentioning about like the Trump signage and stuff. I mean, this summer I drove across 33 states in the U.S., drove almost 30,000 miles, and I saw Trump signs everywhere. And I saw one Harris wall sticker once. I still see a couple like Biden Harris signs, but they're too lazy to even swap them out. They just still have like the Biden stuff on there as well. So that's also kind of a gauge. It's like, well, you're so lazy, you're not even going to go and switch out the sign for a new one, right? Like, how actually animated are you about the new nominee? So
hmm
I don't know, but we'll see what happens. I'm pretty confident though that Trump is going to get in. Then the question comes: is he actually going to be able to do anything with his presidency? That remains to be seen.
What do you think the we'll take one administration at a time, but I want to talk about the Trump administration. One he's done a lot different this during this campaign as far as reaching out to Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr., picking JD Vance as his vice president, utilizing Vivek Ramaswamy. It seems like he has a really solid coalition around him. Um, but I guess some people could say the same thing for 2016 with Bannon and Roger Stone. It just seems like the outsiders that he's chosen this time are are a little bit more grounded into the DC establishment and kind of have more of an understanding of how DC works. And maybe have a little bit more lasting power than they did in 2016. Do you think that his choices for outsiders and his administrative team are going to have a big make a big difference in the way that he enters into let's say he wins the election? Is it going to make a big difference in the way that he enters the White House?
Hmm. Well, I think you could definitely say that this time around, his coalition is definitely wider than it was in 2016. I mean, people got to remember Trump has almost been around for a decade at this point. It's almost like he's kind of a return to normalcy. I mean, people have made up their minds about this guy at this point, as far as I'm concerned. I think another thing, not to backtrack too far, but just one final point on the whole election rigging thing. People have to forget that Trump increased his vote share by the largest margin in any US, sitting U.S. president in history in 2020. He got 14 more million votes in 2020. And I
Mm,
suspect he's probably going to get significantly more votes again in 2024 and continuing like adding his popularity. Now, his coalition being wider is kind of what populists have always done, right? They appeal to a large group of base, get themselves elected. Now, that works for electoral politics, having a wider base because you have more people voting for you. However, it kind of it stretches you very thin as opposed to all these issues. So now you have Trump talking about things like a platform where he talks about immigration, Bitcoin, foreign policy, standing up for Israel. It's just like a hodgepodge of literally everything, right?
mm.
So now the question comes, okay, well, if you've made all these promises to all these different groups who are all going to support you, well, which one are you going to tackle first? Which ones are most important? And that is kind of like a red flag for a lot of people in the more like dissident right and, or I guess you even call it like more of the far right sphere, where it's like, okay, well, just because Trump signals to us on some of these issues, he also signals on a lot of issues that we don't necessarily like. So, which issues are really going to be front and center for his campaign? I mean, look at somebody like RFK, right? I like RFK for a lot of what he has to say about like the health of Americans as a whole, whether it relates to pharmaceuticals and the food industry and such like that. But if you listen to RFK on some other issues, I mean, he's still massively pro-Israel, and he still is for things like the Civil Rights Act, and he has a lot of blind spots as it comes to that race issue in America. So, I mean, if you put RFK in charge of like Food and Drug Administration or the Department of Agriculture, I'd be happy with it. But if you start having him in there, talking about, oh, what we have to do to protect Israel's borders, now I'm going to have a problem. And just like the biggest issue for me and the central issue of the whole campaign is immigration, immigration, immigration. There needs to be mass deportations in this country to a level that even Trump himself isn't giving enough urgency to. I mean, he says he wants to deport 30 million people. I think he got to deport closer to 100 million in this country, to be honest, to actually set things straight as they started going off the rails in 1965 Immigration Act. But that's obviously like a bit of a wet dream for myself. I no doubt in my mind, I don't think that that's like actually feasible the way that things are currently structured. But getting that dialogue into the discourse is what's very important. So, yes, he has a broad coalition. I hope that that doesn't pull him off course for the issues that I think are actually really, really important.
With with JD Vance being from Ohio, a senator from Ohio, and the entire Springfield kind of dialogue leaping off the page here recently, um, do you think that helps keep him on track for the immigration conversation?
I think it does. And I think JD Vance, particularly in this last week, has done an excellent job of not just focusing on the issue of illegal immigration, but also legal immigration, because the media, it's kind of amazing. I don't know if Trump just does this intentionally or if he just has this magic power about him to make the media talk about a certain issue that he wants addressed. So think back to the debate where he said his famous phrase now, which should just tell you right away, by the way, who actually won the debate, because the only thing anyone remembers is they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. It's the only thing anyone remembers from the debate. So right there, he won. So then you had the media fact checking right away. It's like, well, no, they're not eating dogs, but they are eating cats and they are eating geese in the park and such. And so now they bring attention to the issue in a way that nobody else was actually talking about it before. And they're kind of doing it the same way now, where earlier this week, JD Vance says that the Haitians in Ohio are illegal immigrants. And then the media comes in and says, oh, well, actually, they are legal immigrants because of XYZ law. And then JD Vance now goes, good, we're going to repeal that law and get rid of them. And so, yes, I think JD Vance is doing a pretty good job actually keeping the issue of legal immigration just as much, well, legal in air quotes, right? Because, like, nobody actually asked for this, right? Nobody asked for mass immigration. Nobody actually voted on it, right? So the legality of it is moot as far as I'm concerned, right? People don't want it. Americans have been polled consistently for over 30 years. And depending on which poll you look at, it's between like 65 and 85% of people want immigration limited to some degree or other. And they consistently just don't do it. The elites want to go full steam ahead on immigration for whatever reason, and there's a myriad of them. But people want it reduced. So if Vance keeps it keeps it front and center, more power to him.
I told you before we started recording, I was listening to some JD Vance, some of his latest speeches here before we got jumped on, just to kind of see what he's talking about. Because I thought out of all the people that they said that Trump might pick for vice president, I thought he was the least likely to be chosen and probably the best to be chosen, as
I
far as
agree
what
with
I
that.
knew about him. And whenever Trump chose him, I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, maybe we're heading in a different direction. Um, because I'm not the biggest Trump supporter. But and you said not a lot of people have already made up their mind about Trump. I might be one of those people that's kind of odd. I had kind of always kind of looked at Trump as a goofball, and I liked him being in the public spotlight because it made me laugh. And that was it, because I'm just all about humor. I just love, I mean, I watch Kill Tony every Monday. I like to laugh, and I just that's my thing. And so seeing him when he took that bullet earlier this year, and he jumped up and had blood streaming down his face, and he's yelling fight, I was like, all right, I got respect for him as a man now.
Yeah, goes
Which
hard.
I
Yeah.
Yeah, I never had any respect for him as a man. And so that just showed me a different side of him. And I think there is going to be a segment of voter like me that kind of looks at him now and is like, "Oh, you're not just a clown. Like you're actually like a serious man that deserves respect." And I think that's something that people should take into consideration. Um, but as far as what I was saying about JD Vance, I like the way he's handling the questions about the pets in Springfield. And one of the things he's continuously saying when he gets asked that question, he's like, "Hey, my job is not to care what the media thinks is ridiculous. My job is to listen to my constituents and to bring their concerns to the public eye. And that's what I'm doing." And so that's a really good look for him.
Yeah, it's a very good answer. JD Vance and Trump, both of them are excellent on their feet at addressing journos, but they both do it in very different ways.
Mm.
I'd say like JD Vance probably takes way more of a tactical approach to dealing with journos when Trump just kind of has good instincts from always being in the media light. He just kind of shoots from the hip, and more often than not, it ends up working out for him. Trump's got like a good sense of humor as well. He tends to diffuse situations pretty quickly in that regard. But yeah, it's a very interesting 1-2 punch seeing the two of them address what is by everyone can see on our side of things at this point that the chief radicalizer and the chief like enemy of all of us is like journos. Journos radicalized these two goofballs who tried to take out Trump both of these times. And quite frankly, they need to be held to account. Journalists are out of control in this country. They're radicalizing people like beyond belief. Everyone's at each other's throats, and it's nice that they're constantly being kept in the spotlight. And this is like the line that we were running during the first assassination attempt on the OGC is like everyone's talking about the Secret Service incompetence and such. It's like, yeah, you can talk about that all you want, but just by you focusing on the Secret Service is pulling cover for the people who are actually responsible for this. The people who are actually responsible are the people sitting in the New York Times office who, for the last 8 years and change, have been calling Donald Trump the next coming of Hitler.
Hmm.
Those are the people who really need to be punished.
But please don't kill Hitler. That's what they keep saying.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
Hitler, but don't kill him.
yeah.
It's,
exactly.
I mean, I have two examples I want to give here, and I think it's prime examples of how I feel the media is completely out of touch with the American people, because the way I view what's happening with Donald Trump and things he says versus the way that they um, report on it. And so first I want to touch on the debate, right? So we heard consistently that almost immediately that without a doubt Kamala Harris won the debate. That's not what I saw. That's not what I saw at all. I watched that entire debate, and I very rarely do that because I do not like debates. They drive me crazy. I just get irritated and turn it off. But I made myself sit through this entire debate and watch this. What I saw Trump trying to answer questions, Kamala Harris continuously going off script and then acting like being condescending towards Donald Trump, him getting irritated because he was saying, like, whenever she brought up crowd sizes, he's like, my crowds stay because they're patriots and they're worried about the future of the country. Like, he made a point to get right back into it. The future of the country is what's at stake. And you could tell he was getting irritated. And to me, I was getting irritated too. I was like, because this woman, they asked her, do you feel like Americans are better off, now than they were 4 years ago? And she starts talking about being middle class. I don't care how you grew up, lady. Like, answer the damn question. Like, give us some solid answers. And she never did that. And so I was getting frustrated trying to follow what she was talking about, and her not answering any questions, and him continuously going back to the issues and getting more frustrated with her as she made all these faces at him and rolled her eyes and just was completely condescending, really turned me off from her. What, like, completely turned me off. I was just like, okay, like, I was like, yeah, she cackles and she has these weird, like, word salad answers about space, but I didn't dislike her until that debate performance. I found myself like actually disliking her as a person after that.
Yeah, she came
And
off as like every HR representative in every like major corporate office in America during that entire
right.
debate. And Trump had excellent frame control the entire time. We were watching the debate live with like 12 other guys in the OGC. The way we cover these debates is we just get like a whole crowd of like 12 or 13 guys in there. We just start laughing because it's like the only way you can really get through these things. Everyone grabs a
Hmm.
beer and starts cheering and such. And one of the things that really stood out to me is the one goal that Kamala needed to fulfill in that debate, and she didn't get it, was she needed to have that "Yes, Queen, slay" moment when she was going to take it to Donald Trump, right, and say, "Oh, I'm speaking now. I'm a strong woman. I'm taking it to this big, mean misogynist or whatever." And we were just up in arms, like bawling our eyes out, laughing our asses off when Trump basically used the same line
Yeah, I'm
against her
talking.
early.
Sound
Yeah, he's like,
familiar?
"I'm talking now." Yeah, so he said it first and beat her to the punch. And at that point, she was just completely, like neutered basically the entire rest of the debate. And then Trump was just exerting great frame control the rest of the time while also having the two moderators fact check him at least 4 times during the debate and never did it once against Harris, which, I don't really like to sit here and like complain, say, oh, the media is unfair. It's like, yeah, no shit. The media is unfair. Obviously, they're, of course they were going to fact check Trump up there and they were going to fact check Harris. But so we're not coming at this from like, oh, well, like a woe is me kind of deal like you see from so many conservatives. It's just kind of further proves the point that Trump is good under pressure. He was 1v3'd in that debate, and he did a good job with the frame control, despite being corrected. And the media could say whatever they want, but I bet you a lot of people had the same reaction, like you were saying earlier, where they visibly just started to hate Kamala Harris by seeing her in this debate. She just came off as condescending, as a bitch, quite frankly.
Yeah. Well, and this is something I've noticed with uh progressives over the last couple of years. It's like condescending is kind of like their mantra. They think it works, and
Yeah,
it's
you saw
like,
this with COVID. The experts are talking.
well, I mean, I see it like I'll watch like The Hills sometimes, right? With Robbie Suave, and he'll have like Jessica Burbank on there. And she is so condescending when they're having a debate. And I'm like, you're not winning. Like, you have this little smug look on your face, like you're saying something that's like so intelligent, but you're not winning the debate because your attitude about what you're saying and about what he's saying, you're just so dismissive, as if he has no like actual like gripe or complaint in on the subject. That does not win me over. Even if you were what you're saying is correct, that attitude is a turnoff to the majority of people. Like people
Yeah,
don't like know-it-alls. Never
no.
have, never will. It's like I remember my cousin getting in trouble for that whenever she was like 5, 6, 7 years old. Like quit acting like that. People do not respond well to that. And it just again, like I said, it just shows how disconnected it is the media is from the people. And Trump, even though he's a billionaire, he's not an average guy. He has his finger on the pulse of average people.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you saw clips today from him like walking around in a grocery store, and people were up in arms, yelling at him once again. I mean, one of the best things about Trump's character is that he just takes the mask off of everything. People were MSNBC was yelling at him and saying that he should be indicted for election fraud because Donald Trump was handing out $100 bills to single moms of three in grocery stores earlier this week. It's like, yeah, this will help you with your groceries. Look, these prices have gone up so much since the last 4 years under Biden and whatever. And he just seems like a normal guy. He's walking around, he's picking up some popcorn in like the grocery store aisle and everything.
Mm.
Like people just relate to him. I mean, there's that amazing like meme photo of him when he had I think it was like the Clemson football team after they won the national championship at the White House, and he just
Oh
ordered like
yeah,
a
and he had
billion Big Macs.
McDonald's. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like he just seems like a normal guy, even though like he's a billionaire. He talks
Right.
more like a normal guy. People just feel like he's in their corner, and people can argue all they want about if he is or isn't, but perception is reality, especially in a democracy.
Well, in another, in the second example I was going to give, actually, of them, the media just having no clue what average people think and how average people react, is the National Association of Black Journalists when he said Kamala Harris suddenly turned black. Dude, that was one of the funniest things I'd ever heard in my life. I couldn't stop laughing. The crowd was laughing. They couldn't help themselves, whether they were for him or against them. They couldn't stop laughing. It was so funny, and they were so mad about it. And I was like, that is hilarious.
Yeah,
Like
well,
just the way he said it, the way he delivered the line, it was so funny. I just couldn't help but laugh.
yeah, it's interesting to make a note as well is that they learned their lesson from 2016 about having like audience members in on the debates. If people look back to the Obama years and such, like Obama and John McCain and Mitt Romney and Obama, like people in the audience would ask questions to the candidates. Like it's a real CNN sit down, and people are
Mm.
asking the candidates the tough questions and such. But they learned after 2016, where Trump had that amazing moment where he just said to Hillary Clinton, because you'd be in jail, and the whole crowd erupts in laughter and starts cheering for him. And they just do not have audience members in debates anymore. They didn't have any for the first Biden debate. They didn't have any for Kamala because they know the audience is going to cheer for Trump, and they know this is how people's brains work. They work on consensus. If people start laughing, this is why they have laugh tracks in TV shows, right?
Yep.
It's because everyone likes to be part of the team, and if you have people in the audience, no matter how hard they try and screen for it, it doesn't matter because most of the people think Donald Trump is a funny guy. They might not like him, but a lot of people laugh. And you even saw this during the debate as well, where Kamala Harris laughed at one of Donald Trump's own jokes, where he said, she's copying my proposal so much, I thought I was going to send her a MAGA hat. And you could look over
Yeah.
at Kamala and she starts laughing. It's like,
Yeah.
the joke is at your expense, woman. Can you imagine if the audience was there?
Okay, so we're coming up on an hour, so I want to hit one more thing before we jump off of here, if you don't mind. What what does the country look like after 4 more years of Donald Trump?
Oof. Well, in my fantasy of all wishes being fulfilled is the significant rollback of America's foreign policy abroad that is not directly in the interest of the United States. Things like the Ukraine war and Israel conflict, which is completely pulled out of. As far as I'm concerned, by all rights, the only country the United States should be at war with is Mexico, but that's a subject for another day. We need to do mass deportations. Certainly everybody that's come over during the Biden administration, at the very least, needs to be removed. We need to have serious discussions about birthright citizenship and getting that removed. The fact that the United States is the only developed country that still has this archaic like holdover from manifest destiny times where we just needed to give people citizenship to come over here and colonize an entire continent is a holdover that we need to get rid of. I would love to see more tariffs on free trade on trade from abroad, just because I want more revitalization into America's network of jobs at home. I think it's a joke that a company like Ford, that has the benefit of American legal code and tax code and such, outsources 75% of their jobs overseas. It's like, come on, dude. Like, you're taking advantage of Americans and sending the jobs overseas. This is ridiculous. Nobody else thought this way until recently. So I just think it's ridiculous. And then one of the things I'd really, really love to see as well is just somehow, some way, um, people on the right need to get this through their heads that they need to start using power for your own means, as opposed to this idea of like the neutral institutions. The Constitution is going to save us and such. The laws are going to keep everyone in check. It's like, no, these things need to be enforced. You need to enforce this Constitution if that's something you want to save. So I don't care how they do it, but they just need to start thinking in terms of friend versus enemy. All right. Democrats that, perpetuated the COVID-19 nonsense need to be punished. Journos need to be punished. We need to be out for, well, I won't say we need to be out for blood, but people need to start thinking, in such terms. Like, these people are enemies. We cannot share a country with them. We are playing for keeps now. They're literally trying to take out Donald Trump twice now, and no doubt this is going to happen again. I can't imagine what it's going to be like during his presidency and such, where the guy's just going to have his head on a swivel all the time. But that would be my wish. Things like that. I would love to see people like RFK get in there and revitalize the Food and Drug Administration in the United States, because Americans are just so sick and unhealthy. I was in Europe last year for the first time, and I was just blown away. The quality of food that they have over there is just so much better than here in the States. So I would love to see stuff like that. Just America first policies all across the board. Hopefully we can get it done.
And okay, and so one of the things I've been considering is, if Trump does win this election in 4 years, I think politics will be different, right? Um, I think you'll be seeing more Viveks, more JD Vances, less Mitch McConnell's, less Chuck Schumer's, less Nancy Pelosi's. It'll be more about personal connection and less about the machine operating. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um, I would like to see things change in that direction. I'm very concerned of if like Trump and his team haven't learned their same lessons from his first time around as his second time around. If they
Mm,
haven't learned the same lessons, then we're probably just going to go back to another Mitt Romney style candidate when Trump is gone. The
mhm.
Republican Party is just going to try to go back to business as usual, as rough as they can. And it's going to be really, really hard with Trump gone, because he just is such a magnetic figure. I mean, he's easily the most famous person on the planet, at this point. And it's like, okay, if you're no longer having this guy who was a media mogul for years, he was known by every American for reality TV and such. He was like the icon of like the American business playboy for decades, and now he's gone. And as much as I like JD Vance, I like about a lot of what he has to say. I'm not entirely convinced that he's going to be able to fill Trump's shoes in the same way. And we'll see what happens. Whatever they need to do, they need to crush like the old like neocon force, because we cannot allow the return of like your Mitt Romneys and McCain's to try and swoop in to take over the party when Trump is gone, which undoubtedly they're going to, or attempt to at the very least.
Right. And I think they're going to come in as a wolf in sheep's clothing, as like a Ron DeSantis. Um, Maybe he blew his load and he won't be viable in 2028. But I don't know. I don't know if I think I've seen JD Vance evolve since being named vice presidential candidate, and his speeches are better now than they were to begin with. It's not as choppy, but So he's becoming a little bit smoother. He's a bulldog whenever it comes to talking to media, but I don't know if he could top Vivek, and I think Vivek may be the best chance in 2028. Both of them are still very young and have a lot to offer. Um, but I mean, that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. But I do worry about a silver tongue like Ron DeSantis or Marco Rubio type swooping in and seducing the American public and catching them off guard and dragging us right back to where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing too, the big sword of Damocles that's over this whole conversation is that if you don't solve the immigration problem within Trump's like next term here, you're just simply not going to have another election. You just won't, just by demographics in and of itself. So if this problem doesn't get solved, I mean, Trump is just such a magnetic figure. I mean, there's people talking about how he's going to get like 30% of the black vote this time or what have you. I mean, and that remains to be seen. Do I think he's probably going to get more percentage of that vote than any Republican in modern history? I think that's probably a very fair bet, and it's probably very likely. But do we seriously think like the next iteration of whatever Republican candidate is going to be in 2028 is going to have that same effect on like the Latino vote or the black vote? I highly doubt it. So Trump is just such a magnetic personality that just speaks to everybody. I don't know if you can catch lightning in a bottle twice in this regard. So if you don't solve the demographic issue at the very least, the rest of this conversation is moot.
And before I get to the next question, I just point out something you mentioned there, and just to kind of highlight it is I think it was in they said in 2020 Trump got was polling 9% of black men, and he actually got 18% of black men's vote. In this election cycle, he's polling at 25% of black men. So, um, you know, he had 100% improvement over his polling numbers in 2020 as far as black men go. So I don't know what that says and if that's going to be a trend, but that's something to keep an eye on. That could very well help Trump.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so.
the last thing I want to ask, and this is kind of a black pill. Um, if Harris wins, what does the country look like in 4 years?
Ugh. Um,
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's it,
yeah,
folks. No, I'm playing.
yeah, exactly. If Harris wins, I think a comparable situation you could look to right now is what's going on in places like Canada and the UK. The United States will just be on a complete fast track to that point. I mean, if
I
you
was
thought you
thinking
had
Paris.
yeah. If you had like restrictions on, if you thought there were restrictions on speech now, I mean, you'll probably easily get to UK levels of restrictions on speech for right wingers under
Mhm.
a Harris administration. The demographics are still going to go full bore straight ahead. They're going to keep that southern border as open as possible and replace the heritage population of Americans. You'll still continue to see us getting entangled in whatever foreign conflict the military industrial complex and the elites want us to get into next. It's just going to be more of the same what you had under Biden. And, they're just going to put their pedal to the, like, really put their pedal to the floor.
My problem with the Harris administration is the mindset of progressives is progress is good no matter what, and that is not always the case.
Yeah, very
That
much
they,
so.
it doesn't matter what that progress looks like, whether it's legalizing um sex with children, or like they don't care. It's like progress is progress, and progress is always good. And it's like progress is not always good. Sometimes progress in the direction that you're pointed is a bad thing, and you need to turn around and you need to go take the other path because you took a wrong turn somewhere, buddy. So,
Yeah, I very much agree. This like progressive view of history that things can only get better and such if we just keep moving for that horizon is, you know, uh, extremely flawed at this point. And I think more and more people are waking up to this idea of like, promised forever growth and promised forever, progress for progress's sake is leading to some really, really dark places.
yeah. Yeah, and if Harris wins, it's just a continuation of the machine growing. And as you said earlier, this very well could be a last chance. I mean, the demographic changes could make all the difference in the world. You never know. And that could be, something that we're looking at in the future. And this might be the first election I vote in. I still haven't decided yet. I'm still not registered to this date, but it may be the first election I vote in. And that would be something to get my lazy ass up off the couch because I've driven truck for 21 years. I don't like leaving the house if I don't have to. So,
Mm, yeah,
so
fair, fair. I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, at the very least, it's certainly going to be interesting. I mean, they always say, "May you live in strange times." Well, I mean,
oh God,
yeah,
that's a Chinese curse, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, something like that.
Damn
Yeah,
China.
yeah.
All right, man. We'll plug away, buddy.
Yeah. So most of my stuff can be found these days just over at the Old Glory Club. So, like I mentioned, streams are every Thursday, and then our Substack posts are Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If people want more of my own individual stuff, a lot of my intellectual foundation actually comes from Red Pill and Manosphere circles. I'm friends with a lot of the guys in that place, and not the gay, retarded ones like fucking Andrew Tate and all those losers. Like the actual like legit people that actually started the movement. So you can check out more of that stuff on my own channel is Redhawk, and check me out on Twitter as well.
Sounds good, man. All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. This was a fun conversation. Kyle, once again, was correct, even though I hate saying that little bastard. And he's getting ready. Either he's on a flight or he's getting ready to get on a flight to head to the Bahamas for next week or this week. He's
I
in the
think he's there right
Bahamas right
now.
now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He and I were talking about it. Yeah, he was
That
swimming with
son,
sharks. He was telling me
that
about it.
son of a
Yeah,
bitch. I hope one of them
yeah.
eats him.
Yeah.
Not all of them. I still want to talk to him, but just take a toe or something. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Nip nip his ear.
Yeah.
Just make that a fashion statement. Everybody loses 2 centimeters of their ear this year.
Mm.
All right. Well, I'm gonna stop the recording.